Assalamu alaikum, greetings and salutations. Thank you very much for joining me on my weekly live broadcast on my YouTube channel. It's called Chu Chimes In. I'm Fikri Chu. The topic which I've selected to talk about on my third live broadcast is conduct of MPs in Parliament. Currently, Parliament is in session, which began on the 13th of July. What an eventful first day it was. As the whole country was watching, the much-awaited session was not only disappointing, but was embarrassing, to say the least. Chaotic would more or less describe the pandemonium which we as Malaysians witnessed. Shouting matches, heckling, name-calling, insults, and petty fights were the order of the day. Shock and disappointment would best describe the sentiments of the public, witnessing the deplorable and disappointing behavior of these people who call themselves parliamentarians. Sadly, these are the very people we as Malaysians have voted for and are paying to be our voice in Parliament. Their behavior is nothing short of disappointing and insulting to the August House. The most talked about incident on that first day was when the MP of Baling made a racist remark against the MP of Batu Kawan, mentioning her dark complexion. Ironically, the MP of Baling himself is an ethnic Indian with dark complexion as well. He was appropriately asked to apologize and retract his statement the following day, but not before making a lame excuse for behaving in such a manner. Now, these interjections, hurling of verbal abuse, heckling, have long been a feature whenever Parliament is in session. But it is in no way or means something which is acceptable. Both sides of the aisle are guilty, disgusting and reprehensible behavior unbecoming of an elected representative. Previously, we, the public, depended solely on reports of the day's proceedings through newspapers. However, in the last couple of years, we are now privy to their antics with live coverage of the day's proceedings. Suffice to say, we, the public, are simply mortified as we witness the behavior of these grown men, and sometimes some women as well, right, with their utter lack of decorum. Or to put it in simple terms, manners non-existent. Now, the atmosphere of hostility and rudeness was prevalent throughout the first 5 days. And as I've mentioned, many Malaysians have expressed their dismay and disgust. Countless Malaysians, many Malaysians have made their sentiments known by posting tweets and status updates on various social media platforms, chiding and condemning the behavior of these elected representatives on a daily basis. Now, these number of tweets and status updates related to this has grown and continues to grow exponentially. Now, this gives rise to the fact that Malaysians are beginning to hold their respective representatives accountable, that we Malaysians do not condone or accept this sort of behavior. For my part, personally, right, I just cannot believe how these so-called parliamentarians behave. The majority of whom are over 40 and have children of their own, even grandchildren, I would say. As a parent, I would never ever dream of behaving in such a manner. Have they no shame? Do they not realize they have children themselves? Okay? Maybe even grandchildren who may be watching them. Is this the example they wish to set for their own children, let alone the constituents for whom they represent? Do they not realize how they are embarrassing their own constituents with their unruly and contemptuous behavior? Kepimpinan melalui teladan or leadership by example was a slogan used not long ago by the ruling administration. Now, does the unbecoming behavior of these parliamentarians reflect good leadership or leadership which can be used as an example? Kesopanan dan kesusilaan, or good behavior and morality, which is part of the Rukun Negara, is totally ignored, not even given a second thought. Day in and day out, they, as leaders, tell us, their constituents, to be respectful for one another. But do they themselves practice what they preach? How do these so-called leaders expect the rakyat to live by the Rukun Negara when they themselves show no respect whatsoever to one of the tenets of the Rukun Negara? The present Prime Minister proudly celebrated Minggu Rukun Negara on the 9th of July, during which he said, I quote, "Masyarakat Malaysia adalah masyarakat yang bersopan dan bertata susila, beradab, kaya dengan budi bahasa, bertimbang rasa, berpekerti mulia. Bukan sifat rakyat Malaysia untuk bersikap biadab. Bukan sifat rakyat Malaysia untuk bersikap tidak bertimbang rasa." Unquote. Indeed, we as Malaysians, for the most part, exemplifies all that he said. We truly are a nation of people who have nothing but respect for one another, kind-hearted, thoughtful, and ever ready to lend a hand to anyone in distress or in need of assistance. Do the behavior of some of our so-called parliamentarians or elected representatives reflect these values? Clearly, those who have participated in shouting matches, name-calling, heckling, and hurling of verbal insults in the August House, no less, in no way whatsoever lived up to what the present Prime Minister has extolled. Let me reiterate that these are elected representatives of the people. They represent us, our voice in Parliament. Is this the best that we have to represent us? What makes matters worse? Right? This is how our Parliament has been for so long. On the flip side, the advent of the Parliament Digital, a youth initiative that was out to prove the feasibility of a virtual parliament during COVID-19 pandemic, drew comparisons between the well-mannered behavior of those who participated in the virtual sitting and the conduct of actual MPs during this current sitting. Young Malaysians, the youth of Malaysia, proving how well they are able to debate and are simply miles ahead in terms of following decorum. Are these so-called seasoned politicians not ashamed of how even teenagers have basic manners and know better not to interject, heckle, engage in petty fights? Shouldn't these so-called seasoned politicians be the ones leading the way, setting the example instead of mere teenagers? So, do we just sit back and let this continue? What do we have to do? What can we do? Now, this state of affairs in our parliament must stop. No longer should we as Malaysians accept this as the norm. The speaker must stop, castigate, and if necessary, chastise unruly parliamentarians. The speaker must make it known that he or she will not stand for such behavior on either side of the aisle. He or she must exert control over these parliamentarians and hold them to the rules and regulations of a parliamentary session. Leaders of political parties must also be responsible for the behavior of their members. But we all know all political parties in Malaysia have disciplinary committees. Right? Any misconduct of their members are referred to their own disciplinary committee. Why? Why have they not extended the jurisdiction of the disciplinary committee to cover the misconduct of their own members in Parliament? Doesn't the misconduct of party members in Parliament, no less, reflect on the image of their party itself? Unless, of course, they want to be known as a party of unruly hooligans who have no manners and behave in such a manner where they are happy to project themselves as a bunch of worthless hecklers. Because at the end of the day, this is what we, as Malaysians, bear witness to. In finality, these parliamentarians are there in the Dewan Rakyat because we, the Rakyat, put them there through our votes and support. We have no one else to blame but ourselves for giving them a job and paying for them to be our representatives in the Dewan Rakyat. Yes, it's us, my fellow Malaysians, us. Right? Gave them a job. Right? They have a job because we are the ones who gave them that job. They owe their living to us and not vice versa. We must wake up to this. We just have to wake up to this. So let's ask ourselves a very, very simple question before we tick the box in the next coming elections. Do we vote the right candidate who will bring dignity and respect to the August House while representing our voice? Or do we tick the box of a party which we want to form the government, no matter how good, or in some cases, useless or bad the candidate of the party is? Now for me, personally, right, speak for myself, in the coming elections, be it at the end of this year or in 3 years' time, whatever the case may be, I will vote for the right candidate or not at all. It is my dearest hope, deepest hope, that more of us will do the same, as this will force political parties to be very selective and careful with their selection of candidates for the next coming elections. We, as Malaysians, must make it known to these political parties that we ourselves will evaluate each candidate, and voting along party lines will no longer be the main criteria, will be our main criteria to determine who we vote for. Political parties, right? Political parties must be responsible enough to carry out proper vetting and screening of candidates who represents them and eventually represent us, the Rakyat, in Parliament. Ultimately, it is us, the Rakyat, which determines who ends up in Parliament. Let us all vote, right? Let us all vote and support candidates who will not only respect the August House, but also bring back honour and dignity befitting a proper parliamentarian. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Until we meet again, as always, stay safe, be well, and always wear